Grave mistakes were made. The Grave Matter Mysteries. Book 1. By Win Valentine. Chapter 1. Stone Cold and Sinking. The dead don't talk to me. They don't whisper riddles in the dark or rattle chains to get my attention. Honestly, I'd prefer it if they did. At least a chain-rattling ghost has the decency to be external. My problem, my gift, if you asked my great-uncle Rourke, or my curse, if you asked literally anyone else, was internal. It lived in the base of my skull and the pit of my stomach, a physical allergy to the injustice of an unsettled grave. And right now, standing shin-deep in the sucking brackish mud of the Fallows Municipal Cemetery, my head felt like it was being split open by a dull chisel. "Quieten down," I muttered, pressing the heel of my glove against my temple. "I'm working." The headache didn't listen. It pulsed, a copper-tasting static that made my teeth ache. It wasn't the heat, though the Florida humidity was currently trying to drown me in my own sweat. It was the stone. The Fallows was a town built on a lie, that you could bury things in a swamp and expect them to stay put. The water table here was a living thing, rising and falling with the tides and the moods of the bayou. It meant job security for me, Merritt Vance, proprietor of Vance Conservation, but it was hell on the architecture. I looked up at the weeping angel looming over me. She was a monstrosity of Italian marble, far too heavy for the sinking grounds, the oldest and wettest sector of the cemetery. She was currently tilting at a precarious 15-degree angle toward the murky water of the inlet, threatening to take the entire crumbling crypt of Mayor Jebediah Thorne, 1842 to 1898, with her. "You're not supposed to be leaning, darling," I told her, running a hand over the moss-slicked plinth. I checked the spirit level again, still shifting. "Who put you here? Did they even check the limestone density?" I grabbed my bag of lime mortar and a trowel. The work was precise, chemical, and quiet. It usually calmed me. Stone was honest. Stone didn't lie about where it had been or what had happened to it. If a stone cracked, there was a reason. Pressure, weather, or a bad strike. People? People cracked for no reason at all. I worked the mortar into the fissure at the base, trying to ignore the slick trickle of sweat running down my back. The air was thick enough to chew, a soup of salt, decaying vegetation, and the sweet, cloying scent of Confederate jasmine that grew wild over the iron fences. The cicadas were screaming their mid-afternoon chorus, a saw blade shear of noise that usually drowned out my thoughts. But today, the static was louder than the bugs. It had started 2 hours ago, a low-frequency hum that vibrated in my molars. It tasted like pennies. It felt like the drop in pressure right before a hurricane hits. That sudden, airless suck that makes your ears pop. But the sky above was a relentless, cloudless blue. "Something is wrong," the hum whispered. "Something is out of place." I tried to focus on the angel's wing. "Just a migraine," I told myself. "Dehydration. Too much caffeine. Not enough water." "Spade!" The shout broke my concentration. My trowel slipped, smearing mortar on the inscription. I swore, grabbing a rag to wipe it off. I turned, squinting through the shimmer of heat haze rising off the grave markers. Spade wasn't his real name. No one knew his real name, but it was the only one he answered to. He was the cemetery's functional caretaker, gravedigger, and resident superstition expert. He was standing 50 yards down the path, near the cypress line that marked the edge of the encroaching swamp. He was jumping up and down like a man possessed, waving his arms in a wide, frantic semaphore. Spade was a man of few words and deep fears. He wore a bag of brick dust around his neck to ward off spirits, left shots of rum at the crossroads for the darker things, and refused to work after sundown. If he was panicking in broad daylight, it wasn't because of a spider. I sighed, dropping the trowel into my bucket. The headache flared, a sharp spike that made me wince. Coming. The walk to the lower grounds was treacherous. The Fallows lived up to its name. The earth here was soft, hungry, and constantly shifting. The paths were really just suggestions of where the ground had been firm last week. I navigated by memory and instinct, avoiding the darker patches of mud that would suck a boot right off your foot. By the time I reached Spade, the air felt heavier, not just humid, heavy, charged. The hair on my arms stood up, prickling against my long-sleeved work shirt. "What is it, Spade?" I asked, stopping a few feet away. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His face, usually the color of tanned leather, was ashen. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving under his stained jumpsuit. He pointed a trembling, dirt-caked finger at the base of the massive Gills family mausoleum. Or rather, what was left of it. The structure was new construction, less than a month old. It was a gaudy, neoclassical embarrassment of white granite and gold leaf, intended to house the future remains of Preston Gills. Gills was the Miami developer currently trying to buy out the unused sectors of the cemetery to build luxury waterfront condos. He called it reclaiming the coast. I called it desecration for profit. Ironically, the land seemed to agree with me. A massive section of the decorative cornice, a heavy stone scrollwork piece weighing at least 400 pounds, had collapsed. It had torn away from the main facade and crashed into the soft earth below. Spade whimpered, backing away, his hand clutching the charm bag at his throat. "It fell?" I asked, stepping closer. "Shoddy mortar work. I told the zoning board this ground couldn't support that kind of weight." Spade shook his head violently. He pointed again, closer to the ground, and then I saw the shoes. A pair of navy blue velvet loafers, pristine except for a splash of swamp water, were sticking out from under the stone block. The hum slammed into me then, violent and sudden. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a scream. My vision blurred at the edges. Nausea rolled in a hot, acidic wave, buckling my knees. This wasn't just death. I handled death every day. Death was quiet. Death was cold stone and dust. This was violence. The air around the mausoleum felt charged, electric, buzzing with kinetic energy that hadn't dispersed. The static in my head screamed murder. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the mud soaking through my jeans. I grabbed the edge of the stone block. "Help me lift it. Now." Spade hesitated. He looked at the stone, then at the swamp, his eyes wide with terror. "Spade!" I barked, my voice cracking. He might still be breathing. He wasn't. I knew he wasn't. The silence coming from that body was absolute, but I needed Spade to move. He scrambled forward, grabbing the other end of the stone slab. We heaved. The granite groaned, the suction of the mud fighting us. My boots slid in the muck. My shoulders screamed. "On 3, I gritted out. 1, 2, 3. We shoved. The slab tipped, sucking wetly as it pulled free of the mud and rolled onto its side with a heavy thud. Preston Gills lay face up in the depression the stone had made. He looked surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. His eyes were wide, staring up at the canopy of cypress branches and Spanish moss. His mouth was slightly open, as if he had been about to make an offer the universe couldn't refuse. His expensive silk suit was ruined, matted with slime. His chest was wrong, caved in, a ruin of ribs and fabric. I scrambled back, sitting hard in the mud, fighting the urge to vomit. The necromantic static was a hive of bees in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to ground myself. Stone, mud, heat, breathe. Bad. Spade whispered. It was the first word he'd spoken. Bad luck. Bad ground. Go call it in, I managed to say, opening my eyes. Call Pasco. Don't touch anything else. Spade didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled up the bank, pulling his cell phone out with shaking hands, retreating to the safety of the higher ground. I stayed. I shouldn't have. I should have walked away. But the hum held me there. It was demanding now, pulling at my attention. Look. Look closer. I leaned forward, trying not to breathe through my nose. The smell of death hadn't set in yet, just the metallic tang of fresh blood and the swamp's natural rot. The stone had crushed him. That much was obvious. But the angle... I looked at the fallen block. Then I looked at the facade it had fallen from. It was 10 feet up. Gravity does the work, sure, but for a block that size to fall outward far enough to hit a man standing 5 feet from the wall, and there was no blood on the stone. The underside of the granite block, the part that had supposedly crushed the life out of him, was relatively clean. Muddy, yes. But where was the tissue? The gore? I looked back at Gills. His chest was crushed, yes, but the blood around him was pooling under his back, soaking into the earth, not splattered on the front. He didn't die here, I whispered. The realization sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. He was already down. Or someone put him here. The static spiked, confirming the thought. A sharp pain behind my left eye. Yes. Merritt. The voice was tired, gravelly, and entirely unwelcome. It cut through the buzzing in my head like a serrated knife. I looked up to see Detective Ellis Pasco picking his way gingerly through the reeds. He was wearing his usual cheap suit, the jacket hooked over one sweating shoulder, his tie loosened. He looked at the mud, then at his polished Oxfords, with deep, soulful regret. Spade called it in, Pasco said, stopping 10 feet away on a patch of semi-firm grass. He pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling a plume of weary air. Please tell me you're not messing with the body, Vance. He's dead, Ellis, I said, forcing myself to stand. My legs felt like jelly, but I locked my knees. And I'm not messing. I'm observing. Pasco looked at the massive slab, then at the crushed chest of the victim. He grimaced, but it wasn't shock. It was the look of a man foreseeing 3 weeks of paperwork. Preston Gills. Well, that's going to make the evening news. He's been dead less than an hour, I said, wiping my muddy hands on my hips. Body is still warm. No rigor. Thanks, Quincy, Pasco muttered. He stepped closer, squatting down to get a better look, careful not to let his pants touch the grass. Looks pretty straightforward. Unstable ground, shoddy new construction, stone falls, man dies, tragic accident. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. Pasco looked up, eyes narrowing. Excuse me? It wasn't an accident, I said. My voice was trembling, just a little. I hated that. I hated how the hum made me sound hysterical when I was rightfully furious. Feel the air, Ellis. It's static. Heavy. He gave me that look. The one he reserved for me, the crazy stone mason who spent too much time in the sun. It started with pity and ended with exhaustion. We've talked about this, Merritt. The vibe is not admissible in court. It's not just a vibe. I pointed to the stone. Look at the trajectory. For that block to land here, it would have had to jump. And look at the impact site. Where's the splatter? Internal bleeding, Pasco said, standing up and brushing a gnat away from his face. Crush injury. It happens. He was dead before the stone hit him, I insisted. The certainty was a physical weight in my gut. Or he was incapacitated. He didn't try to move? He didn't see a 400-pound block falling? Maybe he was looking at his phone, Pasco said, pulling out his notebook. Maybe he was drunk. We'll wait for the ME. He turned away, dismissing me. He was already writing accidental death in his head. He wanted it to be an accident. An accident meant no manhunt, no press conference about a killer on the loose, no panic in a tourist town. Creating a crime scene out of an accident won't save the cemetery from development, Merritt. He threw over his shoulder. It just makes paperwork. And I'm really tired. He didn't believe me. He never did. To him, I was just the eccentric local eccentric who cared more about dead people than living ones. Accident, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. The hum throbbed, indignant. Pascoe turned to radio the coroner, his back to me. The scene was unsecured. The tide was coming in. I could hear the water lapping closer in the mangroves. In an hour, this mud would be underwater. Any trace evidence would be washed away. I looked down at Preston Gills one last time. What are you trying to tell me? My eyes caught something. Just a glimpse, near the hem of his ruined trousers. A smear of reddish-orange dirt caked into the cuff. I frowned. The Fallows was built on black gumbo mud and gray sand. There was no red clay here, not for 50 miles. But there was red clay at the construction site for the new bypass north of town. The site Gills had visited yesterday morning. If he had been walking around here, in this mud, the red clay should have been washed away or covered in black slime. But it was dry, caked on, which meant he hadn't walked here. He'd been carried. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled my phone out, shielding the screen from the glare, and snapped a picture. Low, quick, zoomed in on the cuff. Vance, Pascoe barked, turning around. Put the phone away. This is an active scene. Reviewing for structural liability, I lied smoothly, sliding the phone into my back pocket. I need to know if the rest of the tomb is going to come down on your ME. Pascoe glared at me, but he didn't ask for the phone. Go home, Merritt. Drink some water. Get out of the sun. I nodded, stepping back. I would go home, but I wouldn't be drinking water. I needed Uncle Rourke's strongest, vilest tea, and I needed to look at that photo on a screen larger than my palm. I looked at the accident one last time. Tragic accident, my ass. Chapter 2. A shovel in the works. Vance Conservation looked less like a business and more like a graveyard exploded inside a library. The carriage house sat at the back of the old Vance plantation grounds, separated from the main house, now a bed and breakfast run by retirees from Ohio, by a hedge of aggressive oleander. Inside, the air was permanently cool and smelled of marble dust, wet limestone, and the drying herbs Uncle Rourke insisted on hanging from the rafters. I slammed the heavy oak door behind me, locking out the blinding Florida sun, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The hum was still there, a low-level buzz in my gums like I'd licked a battery. It wasn't the screaming siren it had been at the crime scene, but it was persistent. It was the echo of violence. Tea, I muttered to the empty room. Vile, murky, bog-water tea. I pushed off the door and navigated the maze of my workspace. A half-restored weeping angel took up the center of the floor, her wing currently sitting on my workbench. Crates of specialized chisels, buckets of lime putty, and stacks of historical records cluttered every flat surface. Most people would call it a mess. I called it a filing system based on sediment layers. I made my way to the kitchenette in the back, a generous term for a hot plate and a sink stained with clay. I grabbed the jar labeled migraine/necromancy/general doom in Rourke's jagged handwriting and dumped a handful of dried leaves into a strainer. The resulting brew was a muddy greenish brown that smelled like wet socks and peppermint. I drank it standing over the sink, grimacing as the bitter heat hit my stomach. It was disgusting. It was also the only thing that worked. As the warmth spread, the static in my head receded to a manageable throb. I breathed out, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I looked like a swamp creature. Mud caked my boots, smeared my jeans, and had apparently made a home in my hair. There was a streak of black muck across my cheek that looked suspiciously like a handprint. Professional? I told my reflection. You look completely professional. I was reaching for a rag when the sound of an engine roaring, no, bellowing, shattered the quiet. The floor vibrated. Dust drifted down from the rafters, settling on the angel's nose. Bessie, I sighed. A moment later, the gravel outside crunched under the weight of a multi-ton vehicle braking hard. The door to the carriage house flew open without a knock, admitting a blast of heat and Verity V. Suitor. V was the only person in the Fallows who could make a safety vest look like high fashion. She was wearing neon orange coveralls with the sleeves tied around her waist, a tank top stained with engine grease, and boots that could kick through a brick wall. Her hair was a riot of purple braids, and she was vibrating with enough energy to power the entire panhandle. "They took him!" she yelled, marching into the room and kicking a bucket of gravel out of her way. I didn't need to ask who. Pasco arrested Spade? Arrested? They tackled him, in the Boneyard, like he was some kind of ninja. V paced a tight circle around the weeping angel, her hands balled into fists. I was dropping off a load of scrap metal at the yard when old Mrs. Higgins called me. She said she saw Pasco putting Spade in the back of a cruiser. I leaned against the workbench, the mug of tea warming my hands. I know, V. I was there. Well, not for the arrest, but I found the body. V stopped pacing. She whipped around, her dark eyes wide. You found Gills? Under a 400-pound piece of granite, I said grimly. Pasco is calling it an accident, or he was, until he decided to arrest Spade. Accident! V snorted, a sound that was less ladylike and more like a congested bulldog. Please, Gills was a shark in a suit. Sharks don't have accidents, they get hunted. And now they're trying to pin it on Spade? Spade? The man catches spiders and puts them outside. He cries during Kodak commercials. I know, I said softly. He doesn't even talk, Merritt. How is he supposed to defend himself? He's probably sitting in a cell right now, terrified, pointing at things and getting yelled at. V grabbed a chisel from the bench and stabbed it into a block of floral foam I used for testing softness. It's bull. Total bull. It's a frame job, I said. Or a panic arrest. Pasco needs to look like he's doing something, and Spade was... Was what? V challenged. Convenient, I finished. He was there. He hated Gills. And apparently, he threatened Gills yesterday. V winced, the anger deflating slightly. Okay, so maybe at the tilted spyglass last night, Spade might have gestured aggressively. Gestured aggressively. He waved a shovel. V threw up her hands. Gills was bragging about how he was going to bulldoze the creepy shack, meaning Spade's shed, and Spade got upset. He slammed his shovel on the bar. It was huge drama. Everyone saw it. I groaned, rubbing my temples. Great. Motive, means, and opportunity. And a public threat. Pasco must think it's Christmas. But he didn't do it, V insisted. She stepped closer, invading my personal space with the smell of diesel and heavy floral perfume. You know he didn't. Does your... thing... say he did it? She gestured vaguely at my head. V was one of the few people who knew about the hum. She didn't understand it. She called it my spooky Wi-Fi, but she believed in it implicitly. The hum says Gills was murdered, I said, violently, but it didn't feel like Spade. Spade feels like wet earth and anxiety. The energy at the grave felt sharp, calculated, cold. See? V slapped the workbench, Cold and calculated, that is literally the opposite of Spade. Spade is warm and chaotic. Pasco won't care about my spooky Wi-Fi, V. Then we make him care. V crossed her arms. I'm going down to the station. I'm going to bail him out. Or break him out. I have a winch on Bessie. I could take the wall off the holding cell. Let's try bail first, I said, putting down my mug. Felony property damage is a bad look for us. Fine, V grumbled. But if Pasco gives me attitude, I'm parking Bessie across the precinct driveway. The Fallows Police Precinct was a squat, concrete block of a building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was freezing inside, a desperate attempt to combat the swamp heat that resulted in everyone wearing fleece jackets in August. I had managed to scrape the worst of the mud off my face and change into a clean shirt, but I still felt gritty. V, in contrast, wore her grease stains like war paint. Detective Ellis Pasco was sitting at his desk, staring at a stack of paperwork with the expression of a man contemplating a long walk off a short pier. When he saw us approaching, he actually put his head in his hands. No, he said, his voice baffled by his palms. Go away. We want to see Spade, V announced, slamming her hand on his desk. The stack of papers jumped. Pasco looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Ms. Suter, Ms. Vance, I should have known. You arrested a man who can't speak for a crime he didn't commit, I said, taking the chair opposite him without asking. That's lazy, Ellis. Even for you. I arrested a suspect who was found at the scene, has no alibi, and publicly threatened the victim less than 24 hours ago, Pasco recited, leaning back in his chair. And who, might I add, was in possession of the victim's property. I froze. What property? Pasco sighed, opened his desk drawer, and pulled out an evidence bag. He tossed it onto the desk. Inside was a gold Rolex. The crystal was cracked, and the band was caked with mud, but it was unmistakably expensive. Found in Spade's locker in the maintenance shed, Pasco said, along with a very muddy shovel. He found it, V said immediately. Spade finds things all the time. He's like a magpie. He finds rings, coins, teeth. Teeth? Pasco raised an eyebrow. Gold teeth, V clarified unhelpfully. From the old graves. He collects them. He doesn't steal them. He just protects them. He had the victim's watch, Pasco said flatly. Gills wasn't wearing it when we found him. Spade had it. That's theft, at the very least. And combined with the threat, it's murder one. I looked at the watch. The hum buzzed faintly, a low, discordant note. May I? I asked, reaching for the bag. Pasco hesitated, then nodded. Don't open it. I picked up the bag. Through the plastic, the watch felt heavy. Not just gold heavy, sad. A wave of emotion washed over me, but it wasn't greed. It was curiosity, innocence. Shiny. Pretty thing in the mud. He found it, I said, looking up at Pasco. He found it in the mud at the scene, probably before Gills was even dead, or maybe after. Merritt, Pasco warned. Think about it, Ellis. If Spade killed Gills, why would he keep the watch in his locker right next to the murder weapon? Why wouldn't he sell it? Or hide it better? Spade isn't stupid. He's simple. Simple men kill for simple reasons, Pasco said, taking the bag back. Greed, anger, a shovel to the head. Gills wasn't killed by a shovel, I said sharply. He was crushed. We're waiting on the ME report, Pasco said, his tone final. But until I have evidence that says otherwise, Spade is my guy. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the stolen goods. You're making a mistake, I said, standing up. It's my mistake to make, Pasco said. He looked at me, and for a second the exhaustion slipped, revealing genuine concern. Merritt, let it go. Gills has powerful family. His daughter is already breathing down the mayor's neck. We need a solve. You need a scapegoat, V spat. I need justice, Pasco corrected. Go home. Both of you. We walked out into the blinding afternoon heat. The humidity hit us like a physical blow. V marched to the truck, yanked the door open, and climbed up into the cab. She didn't start the engine immediately. She just gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. He's going to rot in there, she said quietly. Spade doesn't do well inside. He needs the sky. I looked back at the precinct. I thought about the watch. Shiny. Pretty thing. Spade had picked it up like a crow picking up foil. He hadn't killed for it. And I thought about the red clay on Gills's pant cuff. The clay Pasco hadn't noticed. He won't rot, I said. V looked down at me from the cab. What are you going to do? I pulled my sunglasses out of my pocket and slid them on. The world turned a darker, cooler shade of gray. Pasco wants evidence, I said. I'm going to get him evidence. I'm going to find out why Gills was really in the cemetery, who actually hated him enough to drop a building on him, and where that red clay came from. V grinned. It was a terrifying expression that involved a lot of teeth. So we're investigating? I'm investigating, I corrected. You are driving. Shotgun, V yelled, cranking the engine. Who do we annoy first? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found the number for the Fallows Historical Society. First, I said, climbing into the passenger seat of the behemoth truck, we go see a man about a map. The nerd? V asked, putting the truck in gear. The one who wears wool in August? He's an archivist, V, and yes, the nerd. V peeled out of the parking lot, spraying gravel onto the pristine police landscaping. I love the nerd. Let's go scare him. Chapter 3. History Lessons. The Fallows Historical Society was housed in the old Customs House on Bay Street, a limestone fortress built in 1840 to withstand hurricanes, cannon fire, and the relentless stupidity of tourists. It was windowless, imposing, and kept at a temperature usually reserved for preserving sides of beef. V dropped me off at the curb, Bessie idling with a rumble that rattled the teeth of passers-by. You good? She shouted over the engine. I'm fine, I said, hopping down to the sidewalk. Try not to get arrested while I'm inside. No promises, V cackled, peeling away in a cloud of diesel smoke. I climbed the stone steps, took a breath of the suffocatingly humid air, and pushed open the heavy brass doors. The cold hit me instantly. It was aggressive, sterile, industrial-grade air conditioning. It dried the sweat on my neck in seconds and sent a shiver down my spine. The lobby was silent, smelling of floor wax, old paper, and the distinct, dusty scent of things that had stopped living a long time ago. Hello? I called out. My voice echoed off the marble floors. The reception desk was empty. I walked past it, heading for the archives in the back. I knew the way. I spent half my life digging through death certificates here to verify who belonged in which crumbling tomb. The archives were located in the vault, literally. A massive steel door stood open, revealing rows of metal shelving that stretched back into the gloom. I stepped inside. Arthur? I need the survey maps for the west sector. There was a crash from aisle 4. Oh God! A voice squeaked. I'm not here. I mean, we're closed. I mean, please don't be a ghost. I frowned, walking toward the noise. I'm not a ghost. I'm Merritt Vance. Oh. A head popped out from behind a stack of archival boxes. Merritt. Right. The stony one. Jasper Abernathy looked like he had been born in the wrong century, or possibly the wrong dimension. He was tall and painfully thin, with limbs that seemed slightly too long for his body, like a marionette loosely strung. He had hair the color of dried wheat that refused to lay flat, and he was wearing I kid you not. A three-piece tweed suit. In August. In Florida. He adjusted his glasses, which were sliding down his nose, and peered at me with wide, terrified eyes. Jasper, I said. Why are you wearing wool? You'll die. It's vintage Harris tweed, he said defensively, stepping fully into the aisle. He brushed dust off his lapels. It breathes, allegedly, and it commands respect. The archives demand decorum. The archives demand a dehumidifier, I countered. Where's Arthur? Mr. Penhaligon is indisposed, Jasper said, glancing nervously at the shadows. He's having his tea. He doesn't like to be disturbed during tea. Or ever, really. So I'm holding down the fort. Great. Then you can help me. I walked deeper into the stacks. I need the original geological survey maps for the Boneyard, specifically the sinking grounds immediately surrounding the Gills plot. 1920s, or earlier. Jasper blinked. He didn't move. He was staring at my boots. Is that... He swallowed. Is that graveyard mud? Yes, I said. I came straight from a job. He took a half step back, looking horrified. Is it... fresh? Jasper, it's dirt. It's not haunted. You don't know that, he whispered. Soil retains psychometric resonance. Victorian spiritualists believed that the earth absorbs the emotional discharge of the deceased. If you track that in here, you could contaminate the energetic neutrality of the archives. I stared at him. You give ghost tours, Jasper. Isn't energetic contamination your whole business model? That's different. He finally moved, scurrying past me to a filing cabinet, giving me a wide berth as if I were radioactive. The tours are theater. Performance art. This is preservation. We can't have rogue ectoplasm attaching itself to the census records. I promise not to smudge ectoplasm on the census, I said, crossing my arms. Just the maps, Jasper. He sighed, a long, tragic sound, and began pulling open drawers. His hands, I noticed, were elegant, thin fingers, ink-stained, moving with surprising grace across the file tabs. For all his neuroses, he knew his domain. The sinking grounds, he muttered. Sector 4, Hydrology and Land Reclamation, 1920, 1910. Ah, here we are. He pulled a large, mylar-encased folio from the drawer and carried it to the viewing table. He switched on the light box, his face illuminated by the glow. This is the 1905 Coastal Survey, he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. The fear evaporated, replaced by the distinct focused intensity of a nerd in his element. Look at the coastline. See how much further out it was? I leaned in, my shoulder brushing his tweed-clad arm. He smelled like old books, lavender laundry detergent, and nervous sweat. It wasn't unpleasant. The Boneyard was high ground then, I murmured, tracing the line of the cliff. The water table has risen 3 feet since then. 4, Jasper corrected. The drainage canals dug in the 50s destabilized the limestone bedrock. It created a subterranean liquefaction effect. He looked at me, his eyes bright behind his glasses. It's fascinating, really. The hydrology of the swamp is actively reclaiming the land. It's not just sinking, Merritt. It's being digested. Comforting, I said dryly. Now show me the plot where Gills was building. Jasper flipped a page. Here, the northwest quadrant. See? In 1905, this was listed as unstable marsh. It was never meant to be zoned for burial. The original planners marked it as a natural drainage basin. So Gills knew, I said. He had to know. If this map is public record, his engineers would have seen it. Oh, absolutely, Jasper said. Preston Gills spent weeks in here last month. He had me pull every geological survey from 1850 to present. He was looking for Loopholes, I think. Or bedrock. He was looking for a way to justify building a condo on a sponge, I muttered. Wait. You said he looked at every survey? Yes. He was quite aggressive. He didn't like it when I told him the 1890 map was unavailable. I paused. The 1890 map? The Founders Survey, Jasper explained. Commissioned by the original town council, it's the most detailed map of the original property lines and burial sites. Why was it unavailable? Jasper looked uncomfortable. He fidgeted with his cufflink. Well, it's not unavailable in the sense that it doesn't exist. It's just misplaced. Mr. Penhaligon had it in his office for restoration, and then, well, it hasn't been refiled. Arthur lost a map? I raised an eyebrow. Arthur Penhaligon? The man who catalogs his own paperclips? I know, Jasper whispered, looking terrified again. It's unheard of. But I can't find it. And when Gills asked for it, Arthur got very stiff. He told Gills the map was too fragile for viewing and ushered him out. The hum buzzed in my ear, a sharp mosquito whine of warning. Jasper, I said slowly, did Gills ever see that map? I don't think so. Unless, Jasper chewed his lip. Unless he came back when I was on my lunch break. Arthur usually handles the VIPs. I need to see the log, I said. I need to know who checked out the maps, and when. Merritt, I can't, Jasper squeaked. Privacy policies, archivist ethics. Mr. Penhaligon would skin me and bind me in leather. I turned to him, leaning my hip against the table. I softened my voice. I wasn't good at soft, but for Jasper, I tried. Jasper, a man is dead. A friend of mine is being framed for it, and I think that missing map might show why Gills was killed. Jasper stared at me. He looked at the map on the table. He looked at the door to Arthur's office, which was shut tight. You really think it's murder? He whispered. I know it is. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. Okay, but you have to promise not to tell Arthur. He's been strange lately. Stressed. I don't want to upset him. I promise, I lied. I plan to upset Arthur very much. Very soon. Jasper hurried to the computer terminal. He typed furiously, his long fingers clattering over the keys. Okay, he said. Here. July 12th, Preston Gills checked out the 1905, 1910, and 1920 surveys. Returned same day. And the 1890? Listed as in restoration, restricted access. Last checked out by A. Penhaligon, June 4th. Is there anyone else? I asked. Anyone else interested in that specific sector? Jasper scrolled down. Just you. And... wait. What? Orion Pétis, Jasper read. Owner of Wick and Wire. He came in 2 days ago. He asked for the layout of the old Potter's Field. The Pauper's Graves? I frowned. Why would a tourist trap owner care about paupers' graves? He said he was researching local legends for a ghost walk, Jasper said, rolling his eyes. He wanted to know where the witches were buried. I told him we didn't burn witches in Florida. We mostly just died of malaria. He didn't think that was spooky enough. I looked at the map again. The area Gills was digging in, the sinking grounds, was close to the old Potter's Field boundary. Did Pates see the 1890 map? No, Jasper said. I told him it was missing. He got angry. He accused Arthur of hoarding secrets. He said, Jasper lowered his voice to a scandalized whisper. He said Arthur was sitting on a gold mine of bones. A gold mine of bones, I repeated. The phrase sent a chill through me. Creepy, right? Jasper shuddered. I hate that guy. He wears velvet loafers. Who wears velvet in a swamp? I froze. Velvet loafers? Yes, navy blue ones, with little gold tassels. I saw them when he was yelling at the desk. I thought, that is a man who has never encountered an unexpected puddle. I grabbed Jasper's arm. He yelped. Jasper, I said intensely, you are brilliant. You are a genius wrapped in tweed. He blinked, his face flushing a bright, furious pink. I am? Yes. Now, I need you to do one more thing for me. Can you print a copy of this 1905 map? And keep an eye out for that 1891. If it turns up, call me. Immediately. Of course, Jasper stammered. But, Merritt? Be careful. If Gills was murdered over a map. I'll be fine, I said, releasing his arm. I work with stone, Jasper. I'm hard to break. He looked at me, and for a second, the fear in his eyes wasn't for himself. It was for me. Stone breaks, he said quietly, if you hit it hard enough. I looked at him, surprised by the depth in his voice. Maybe there was more to the nervous archivist than tweed and allergies. I'll keep that in mind, I said. He printed the map. I took it, rolling it tightly. Thanks, Jasper. Seriously. You're welcome, he said, adjusting his glasses. Please, try not to track any more mud out. The janitor is terrifying. Deal. I walked back out into the heat, my mind racing. Orion Pates wore velvet loafers, navy blue ones, just like the ones I saw sticking out from under the stone. But Gills had been wearing them. Or had he? The hum buzzed, static and confusion. I pulled out my phone and dialed V. Pick me up, I said. We're going to a voodoo shop. Did we scare the nerd? V asked. No, I said, looking back at the limestone fortress. I think the nerd might have just given us our first real lead. Chapter 4. Voodoo in Velvet. Orion Pate's shop, Wick and Wire, sat on the corner of River Street like a festering boil on the face of historical preservation. The building was the authentic 19th-century brick warehouse, but Pates had painted the trim a violent bruised purple and hung a neon sign in the window that flashed real magic in an seizure-inducing strobe. V pulled Bessie onto the curb, not near it, on it, stopping inches from a display of plastic skulls. Do you want me to come in? V asked, revving the engine aggressively. I could knock over a shelf. Accidentally. Stay here, I said, eyeing the neon sign. If I'm not out in 10 minutes, it means I've strangled him with a string of Mardi Gras beads. Come get me then. I stepped out of the truck and into the smell of the river. Mud, brine, and diesel. It was a clean smell compared to what hit me when I opened the door to the shop. Wick and Wire smelled like a head shop mated with a spirit Halloween. It was an assault of synthetic patchouli, burning sage, and desperation. The walls were lined with cursed driftwood, mass-produced tarot decks, and jars of local swamp water that was definitely just tap water with green food coloring. Orion Pates was behind the counter, polishing a crystal ball with a microfiber cloth. He was a man who had curated his appearance from a Pinterest board labeled Mysterious Southern Gentleman, but missed the mark by several tax brackets. He wore a cream linen suit that was too tight in the shoulders and, just as Jasper had promised, navy blue velvet loafers. I looked at the shoes. They were absurd. Loafers made for a library in Vienna, not a shop built on a floodplain. And there, caked into the instep of the left heel, was a smear of gray mud. The hum in my head gave a little kick-snerek. Not a full scream, but a distinct poke. We're close, Pates said, not looking up. His voice was smooth, practiced, and dripping with fake gravitas. I sense a skeptical energy. You sense a stonemason who knows you're selling driveway gravel as moon rocks, I said, walking to the counter. Pates looked up. His smile falters. Ah, Ms. Vance, To what do I owe the pleasure? Here to threaten me with a code violation again? Not today, Orion. I picked up a piece of haunted driftwood from a basket on the counter. It still had the barcode sticker on the bottom. I'm here about Preston Gills. Pates didn't flinch, but his hand stopped moving on the crystal ball. Tragic, he said. A great loss for the community. You hated him, I said, tossing the driftwood back into the basket. It clattered. He was evicting you. He called your shop a tacky blight in the town council meeting last week. He was a Philistine, Pates hissed, the smooth facade cracking for a second. He wanted to put a frozen yogurt stand here. Frozen yogurt? In a building with this much resonance. Is that what we're calling it? I leaned casually against the counter, inspecting the mud on his shoe. Resonance? Or was he just digging too close to your supply of cursed artifacts? Pates straightened up, smoothing his lapels. I don't know what you're implying, Merritt. I was nowhere near the Gills site. Strange, I said, because I have a reliable source who says you were asking for maps of that exact sector 2 days ago, and your shoes have Boneyard mud on them. Specifically, the gray clay from the sinking grounds. It has a high sulfur content. Distinct smell. Pates looked down at his feet. He flushed, a patchy red creeping up his neck. I take walks, he snapped. It's a free country. I enjoy the atmosphere. Did you take a walk under a 400-pound cornice, Orion? He laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. Me? Kill Gills? Please. I'm a lover, not a fighter. Besides, I wasn't the only one out there. I went still. Who else? Pates leaned in, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. He lowered his voice, dropping the mysterious gentleman act for pure gossip. I saw her, the night before he died. I was out there, looking for materials. Stealing brick from the crypts, I translated, procuring, and I heard voices. Gills was arguing with someone, a woman or something. A woman? I pressed. Tabitha Gills? No. Pates shook his head. Older or timeless, hard to tell. It was foggy. But she was wearing full mourning weeds, Victorian style, black veil, corset, the works. She was sitting on top of the thorn angel. My blood ran cold. The hum spiked, a sharp needle behind my eye. Sitting on it? I asked. Like, resting? Like she owned it, Pates whispered. She was just watching him dig. Gills was shouting at his crew, waving that stupid flashlight around, and she was just perched there, staring. Did you see her face? No, but when Gills yelled, the air got cold, like freezing. In July. I decided my procurement could wait and left. He shuddered, and this time it looked real. I sell ghosts, Vance. I don't mess with real ones. I looked at him. He was a fraud, a thief, and a liar. But he was terrified. If you tell the police you saw a ghost, they'll certify you, I said quietly. Did you see anyone living? Spade? A rival contractor? Just the crew, Pates said, retreating behind his counter. And the woman. Look, take a free sage bundle and get out. You're blocking the feng shui. I ignored the sage. One more thing, Orion. The mud on your shoes? Clean it off. It places you at the scene of a felony. And if Pasco sees it, he won't care about your ghost story. Pates looked at his shoes, then at me. Why tell me? Because I know you didn't kill him, I said, walking to the door. You would have used poison, or a curse. Dropping a rock is too much manual labor for you. I stepped back out into the heat, the humidity wrapping around me like a wet towel. V was idling Bessie at the curb, blasting a death metal track that shook the pavement. I climbed in, slamming the heavy door. Well? V asked, turning down the music. Did he confess? Did you break his crystal ball? He didn't do it, I said, staring through the windshield. The world looked too bright, too sharp. But he saw something. What? A woman in black, I murmured. Sitting on the angel, the night before the murder. V snorted. A ghost? Pates is selling you his own product, Mayor. Maybe, I said. I rubbed my temple where the static was buzzing again. But he said the air got cold. Freezing cold. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly. I clenched them into fists. It wasn't Pates. It wasn't Spade. But someone had been out there. Someone who could drop the temperature of a Florida swamp in July. V, I said, pointing down the road. Take me back to the Boneyard. Now? V checked her watch. It's almost sunset. The mosquitoes will be the size of hummingbirds. I missed something, I said. Pates went there to steal. Gills went there to dig. I need to know what they were looking for before the sun goes down and the shadows get long. V sighed, throwing the truck into gear. Fine. But if a zombie eats you, I'm telling your Uncle Rourke it was your idea. Deal. As we drove away, I looked back at Wick and Wire. Pates was in the window, scrubbing his velvet loafers with a rag. He was right about one thing. He didn't mess with real ghosts. But as I watched the shadows lengthen over the sinking town, I had the sinking feeling I was about to. Chapter 5. The Hum and the Heat. V left me at the service gate as the sun bled into the horizon. Dusk in the swamp isn't colorful. It's just a bruise of purple light that makes the water verify oil. Call me. V leaned out the truck window, her elbow resting on the dented metal. The cab smelled of diesel, grape soda, and the stale heat of the engine. If a ghost eats you, I'm keeping your record collection, especially the Tom Waits. Generous. I shoved my hands into my pockets to hide the tremor. My fingers brushed the lint and grit at the seams. If I'm not back in an hour, assume I've eloped with a moss monster. We'll register at Bed Bath & Beyond. Gross, but plausible. V revved the engine, a throaty growl that vibrated in the soles of my boots. Be safe, Mur. The bugs out here are big enough to carjack you. I'll be fine. I watched Bessie rumble away, tail lights eaten by the mist rising from the drainage ditches. A lie, of course. I didn't feel fine. I felt like a tuning fork vibrating on the edge of a table, waiting for the hand that would stop the noise, or knock me off entirely. I turned and walked into the boneyard. The sinking grounds were quiet. Too quiet. During the day, the cemetery was business. Tourists snapping photos of the Gothic decay, groundskeepers fighting the kudzu with gas-powered trimmers, families tending plots with plastic flowers. At night, the living retreated. They left the space to the humidity, the mosquitoes, and the memory of what lay beneath it. The path was soft. My boots sank an inch with every step, the mud sucking at the rubber with a wet, kissing sound. I navigated by memory, avoiding the patches where the ground had given way to water. To my left, the obelisk of the founder's family tilted drunkenly. To my right, the iron fence of the potter's field was consumed by trumpet vines, nature choking the metal. Police tape around the Gills mausoleum hung limp in the heavy air. Yellow plastic against gray stone. It looked cheap, temporary. The crime scene techs had packed up hours ago, leaving boot prints in the mud and a sense of profound indifference. They had processed the site for an accident, identifying the body, measuring the angle of the fall, calling it a day to beat the rush hour traffic. I ducked under the tape. The fallen cornice block lay on its side, a white tooth pulled from the jaw of the crypt. It was massive. Vermont granite, not local limestone. Gills had paid for the good stuff. I circled it, using the flashlight on my phone. The beam cut a weak cone through the gloom, catching dust motes and swarms of gnats that hung in the air like static. I ran my hand over the fracture point on the mausoleum wall. The stone was rough, crystalline. Clean break, I whispered. Too clean. Granite doesn't snap like a carrot. It shears. It crumbles. Unless there's a fault line, or unless someone terrified it structurally. I pulled a small penknife from my pocket and probed the mortar joint where the block had sat. The lime putty was soft. Too soft for a cure that should have been weeks old. I scraped a bit onto my thumb. It was gritty. Sandy. Too much aggregate, I noted. Weak mix. Pates was a liar, but a coward's liar. If he said he saw Gills arguing with someone, he probably saw it from behind a bush while wetting his velvet pants. But Pates didn't know how to mix mortar to fail on command. That took knowledge. That took engineering. If a second person, a real, living person, had been here, there would be evidence, not just hearsay. I crouched near the angel's base. The hum was quiet for now. Low-level static in my molars, like a radio left on between stations. Waiting. It was a physical pressure, a barometric drop internalized in the skull. It meant death was close, but settled. Come on, I muttered, brushing away decaying cypress needles. Give me something, a footprint, a cigarette butt, a velvet tassel. Nothing. Churned earth and heavy police tread marks. The cops had trampled the immediate area, obliterating any subtle signs. I expanded my circle, moving toward the cypress line. The ground here was undisturbed, a mat of brown needles and black mud. I stood, wiping my hands on my jeans. The heat pressed against my skin like a wet wool blanket. Sweat trilled down my spine, soaking the back of my shirt. The air was thick enough to chew. It tasted of salt and rot. Cicadas screamed their nightly chorus, a deafening mechanical saw noise bouncing off stone crypts, a wall of sound that vibrated in the chest. Re. Then they stopped. Not a fade, not a lull, a cut, like someone threw a breaker switch on the swamp. Silence rushed in. It was physical, a vacuum. My ears rang with the sudden absence of noise. The gnats dropped out of the air. The frogs ceased their croaking. Then the heat broke. It didn't drift away. It was shoved. The temperature plummeted 20 degrees in a second. Then 30. My sweat turned to ice on my skin. Breath seized in my lungs, a sharp gasp puffing out in a white cloud of condensation. Frost bloomed on the iron railing of the fence, spiderwebbing across the metal in seconds. I spun. Hello? My voice was thin, swallowed by the cold. The flashlight beam wavered. I swept it across the clearing. Mausoleum. Angel. Cypress trees. Nothing moved. No wind. Spanish moss hung still, gray rags frozen in ice. But the smell hit me. Not rot, not sulfur. Sharp. Biting. Alive. Hot peppers. Scotch bonnets crushed under a boot heel. Capsaicin stinging the back of my throat, making my eyes water. And beneath it, the rich, sweet tang of dark rum. The hum roared in my skull, no warning, not a buzz, a spike of pain that doubled me over. It felt like a railroad spike driven between my eyes. I clutched my head, squeezing eyes shut against the white spots dancing in the dark. L-O-O-K. The command bloomed in the gray matter of my brain, not auditory, telepathic, a fishhook yanking my head up. I opened my eyes. She was sitting on the fallen angel. Physics said she couldn't be there. The stone was angled sharply, slick with new condensation, but she perched on the crushed marble wing like a throne. Rigid posture, absolute balance. She wore black, layers of it, heavy Victorian mourning silks that absorbed the meager light of the moon. A high-collared bodice that would have suffocated her in the heat 5 minutes ago. A black veil obscured her face in lace, but the stare behind it burned colder than the air. She held a glass of dark liquid in one gloved hand. As I watched, terrified, she tipped it. A steady stream of rum poured onto the stone where Gills had died. It hissed. Steam rose, smelling of burnt sugar. Looking at her didn't feel like looking at a ghost. Ghosts are wispy, sad, fading things caught in a loop of trauma. I'd felt them before. Faint echoes of emotion. She felt heavy, real, dangerous. A storm front compressed into the shape of a woman, a queen in her counting house. "Who are you?" I whispered. My hands shook. My body knew what my mind refused to accept. I was in the presence of a predator. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared through the lace. I felt the weight of her judgment, cold iron on skin, reading every lie I'd ever told and finding them boring. She was tallying my worth, and I wasn't sure I passed the audit. Slowly, deliberately, she raised a gloved hand. She didn't point at me. She pointed past me, toward the edge of the swamp where sawgrass grew thick. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed run. Run effectively. Run fast. Find a well-lit Waffle House and bury myself in hash browns. But the hum pushed me. It physically turned my head. "Look where she points, Merritt." I turned. Through the mist, a patch of reeds looked wrong. Flattened. Not by wind. By something dragged. A line of broken stalks vanishing into dark water. When I looked back, the angel was empty. The woman was gone. The cold vanished with her. Suffocating, wet heat slammed back into me like a physical blow. The frost melted instantly, dripping onto the mud. Cicadas started up again, chaotic and terrified, screaming to fill the silence. I collapsed against the mausoleum wall, sliding until I hit mud, chest heaving, hands numb. My breath came in ragged gasps. "Hallucination," I gasped, heels of my palms digging into my eyes. "Heat stroke, stress, dehydration. You are a Vance. Vances go crazy. It's starting. Uncle Rourke warned you." I repeated the list like a prayer. Visual disturbances, auditory hallucinations, paranoia. But the smell of peppers lingered, burning my throat, and the stone where she had poured the rum was wet, sticky. I forced myself to stand. Legs like water. But I wasn't going to die in the mud. I was going to prove I was crazy. Walk to those reeds, find a muskrat or a soda can, and check myself into a clinic. "Just a muskrat," I whispered. "Meaningless trash." I stumbled toward the spot she'd pointed to. Mud sucked at my boots, heavier now. I pushed through sawgrass, sharp edges slicing my sleeves. Water soaked my jeans to the knee. I shone the flashlight into the reeds. "Nothing," I said loudly. "See? There's—" My boot hit something hard. Not a root. Roots give. This didn't. Solid. Manufactured. I knelt, ignoring the water swamping my boots. Reached into the muck. Fingers brushed cold, wet leather. I pulled it out. A book. Heavy black ledger. Bound in oilcloth. Swollen with water, dripping slime, but the binding held. I wiped mud from the cover. No title. Just a date stamped in gold foil, mostly flaked away. 1890. My heart skipped. The missing map year. I opened it. Pages stuck together. Ink bleeding, but legible. Handwriting precise. Spidery. Familiar. Account of T. Penhaligon regarding the displacement. Penhaligon. Arthur's family. I flipped a page, peeling wet paper apart. Not a map. A list. Names. Dates. Money paid. Item. Retrieval of obstruction. Cost. 50. Paid by. Town Council. Item. Silence regarding the location of smudged. Cost. 100. I looked back at the angel. Silent. Weeping stone tears into the dark. The rum stain was already drying to a sticky glaze. I wasn't crazy. Or if I was, my hallucination had just handed me evidence. Someone threw this here. Recently. Reeds broken fresh. Stalks green inside, not brown. Gills had found this. Or someone had taken it from him and tossed it into the swamp to rot. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty air. The only answer was a gust of wind smelling faintly of sulfur. I shoved the ledger into my jacket, zipped it tight, and ran. I ran back the way I came, boots pounding on the soft earth. I didn't care about the mud. I didn't care about the thorns snagging my jeans. I vaulted the low stone wall of the potter's field and hit the gravel service road. The lights of the old sector glowed in the distance. Orange sodium vapor lamps, neon beer signs, headlights. The world of the living. It felt miles away. I didn't stop running until my boots hit pavement. The air here smelled of exhaust and fried shrimp, not peppers and death. Cars drove by, oblivious. A couple walked a dog. Normalcy. I leaned against a street lamp, gasping for air that didn't smell like judgment. I clutched the jacket tight against my chest. The ledger was heavy, cold. I needed light. I needed noise. I needed the nerd. Chapter 6. The Coffee and the Compass. The Fog Cutter Cafe was the exact opposite of a cemetery. Loud, painfully bright, smelling of chicory coffee, burnt sugar, and tourist sunscreen. I pushed through the screen door. Bells jingled aggressively. The blast of AC hit my wet clothes, but this time, the cold felt manufactured. Safe. GE appliance cold. Not grave dirt cold. I stood in the entryway, dripping swamp water onto the checkerboard linoleum. My chest still heaved, tight with the memory of the woman in black. The hum in my jaw had dialed back to a dull throb, the kind you get after grinding your teeth for 3 hours. Maeve O'Connell looked up from the espresso machine. She was built of sharp angles and sharper opinions. She wiped a steam wand with violent efficiency. "You look like you wrestled a gator, Merritt," she called over the hiss of milk. "And lost." "Mud," I managed. "Just mud." "You're tracking it on my floor." She was already reaching for a mug. "Black. 3 shots." "To go?" "Ideally intravenous," I said, peeling my wet jacket from my skin. "But a mug is fine. I'm staying." I scanned the room. Mostly empty. The dinner crowd hadn't hit. The lunch crowd was sleeping off fried shrimp comas. Then I saw him. Jasper Abernathy sat at a corner wobbly table, hunched over a stack of index cards. Still in the tweed suit, though he had shed the jacket to reveal a vest that looked suspiciously like upholstery fabric. He was fiercely dissecting a scone with a knife and fork. He looked ridiculous. He looked completely, beautifully mundane. I walked over. My boots squelched. Jasper looked up. He blinked, fork halfway to his mouth. His eyes went to the mud on my jeans, the wet jacket clutched to my chest, then my face. "Merritt." He lowered the fork. "You look permeable." Permeable is a strong word. I pulled out the chair opposite him, sat heavily. The wood creaked. "I prefer drowned." "Did the archives attack you?" Genuine concern. "The humidity control system in the basement leaks?" I went back to the Boneyard. Jasper winced. "Ah, recreational grave stomping? In this heat?" "Investigative grave stomping." Maeve arrived with my coffee. Black, oily, radiating heat. I wrapped both hands around the ceramic, needing the burn to prove my nerves still worked. I took a sip. Tasted like battery acid and heaven. "You found something," Jasper said quietly. He pushed his scone plate aside, leaning in. The playfulness dropped out of his voice, replaced by that focused intensity from the archives. "Didn't you?" I looked at him, a nervous archivist who ironed his socks. I was a stonemason who saw ghosts. We shouldn't make sense in the same zip code, but seeing the way he watched me, not with pity, but with data-driven curiosity, I felt my shoulders drop an inch. I found a book. I unzipped my jacket. The ledger was damp, smelling faintly of swamp, but the oilcloth held. I placed it on the table between the sugar dispenser and the mutilated scone. Jasper stared. He didn't touch it immediately, hovered his hand over the cover, checking for heat. Bound in oilcloth, he murmured. Late 19th century commercial standard. Where was it? In the reeds, 30 yards from where Gills died. Submerged? Partially. Thrown there. Jasper finally touched it, opened the cover with a reverence usually saved for religious texts, saw the date stamp. 1890, he whispered. Looked up at me, eyes wide behind his glasses. The missing year. Open it. He turned pages, peeling them apart with painful slowness. Paper swollen, ink feathered but legible. He scanned the entries, lips moving silently. Not a survey, he frowned. Private account ledger? Look at the handwriting. Loop of the L, heavy cross on the T. Penhaligon. Thaddeus Penhaligon, Jasper corrected. Arthur's great-grandfather. Town clerk in the 1890s. Handled official correspondence for the founding families. Read the entry I found. I pointed to the bottom of the page. My finger left a smudge of dirt on the table. Jasper adjusted his glasses. August 4th, 1890. Payment to Captain J. Rackham. 50 gold sovereigns for retrieval of obstruction. He paused. August 5th. Payment to Councilman Vance. 100 gold sovereigns for silence regarding the location of the displacement. He looked up. Vance? As in, my great-great-grandfather. Coffee turned sour in my stomach. Apparently, my family wasn't just fixing graves. We were paid to hide them. Displacement, Jasper muttered, tapping the page. Civil engineering term. Moving earth. Moving water. Moving a body. Or moving many bodies. He flipped back a few pages. Look at the expenses leading up to this. Lumber for cofferdam, labor for night dredging. Whisper payments. He looked at me. Merritt, they weren't building something. They were burying something massive. The pirates' tithe, I said. Arthur mentioned it. Or you did. A rumor, local legend, that the town wasn't founded by settlers but by pirates who needed a place to launder gold. But this... He touched the ledger. This suggests they didn't just launder gold, they laundered history. I sat back, adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. So Gills found this. Found proof the sinking grounds isn't just an unstable swamp, it's a cover-up. He was going to expose it? Or use it, Jasper said. Blackmail is powerful in real estate. If he could prove the founding families, Penhaligons, Vances, Suitors, built wealth on pirate gold and illegal burials, he could invalidate historical protections, bulldoze the whole cemetery. So Arthur killed him to protect the library? Arthur killed him to protect the legacy. Arthur believes history is pristine, noble. If this gets out, his family isn't blue blood, it's pirate blood. A shiver went through me. Not AC. Memory of the woman on the Angel. Jasper, I said quietly, are there stories, ghost stories, about the Penhaligons? Jasper looked up from the book, studied my face, saw the tension in my jaw, the way I gripped the coffee mug. Why? Because I saw something. Words tasted like ash. Before I found the book, temperature dropped. Air smelled like peppers and rum. A woman sitting on the Angel. I waited for him to laugh, call a doctor, offer sage. Jasper didn't. He took off his glasses, cleaned them on his vest. Woman in mourning? Black veil? I nodded. That's not a Penhaligon ghost, Jasper said softly, glasses back on. That sounds like a Loa. A what? A Loa, Haitian Vodou spirit. Specifically, Maman Brigitte. Stomach dropped. Voodoo? Pates was talking about voodoo. Pates sells plastic dolls. Maman Brigitte is the real deal. Guardian of the dead. Wife of Baron Samedi. She protects graves. Specifically, graves of women, and graves that have been forgotten. He looked at the ledger, then at me. She smells like hot peppers, Jasper added. Her signature. She drinks rum infused with them. If you smelled that, I'm hallucinating. It was the heat. Stress. Jasper reached across the table. For a second, I thought he was going to take the book. He just rested his hand near mine. Not touching. Anchoring. Merritt. When I was 12, I got lost in Ocala National Forest. Dusk. Terrified. I saw a bear. Massive black bear standing on hind legs staring at me. I screamed. Ran into a ranger station. Okay, that's terrifying. Ranger told me there were no bears in that sector. Said it was a stump. Burnt pine stump. Showed it to me the next day. Looked exactly like a bear. See? I exhaled. Stumps. Shadows. The mind plays tricks. Right. Jasper smiled gently. Except, when I showed him the stump, there were claw marks on the tree next to it. 7 feet up. I stared at him. The ranger saw a stump because he needed it to be a stump. I saw a bear because I was a terrified kid. But the claw marks? Those were real. The bear was real. My fear didn't make it real, and his logic didn't make it fake. He tapped the muddy ledger. You found the book, Merritt. The claw marks are real. Does it matter if a ghost showed you where to look? Or if your subconscious noticed the broken reeds and projected a scary lady to make you pay attention? I looked at the ledger. Mud on my hands. You're saying I'm not crazy? I'm saying you're results-oriented. And right now, the result is the motive for murder sitting on this table. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The coffee cup stopped rattling. You're weirdly good at this. I have a lot of anxiety, Jasper shrugged. Spent 30 years rationalizing irrational terror. I'm a professional catastrophist. He pulled the ledger closer, shielding it with his body as the door opened and tourists walked in. We need to decode the rest. There's a location listed. The sunken chest. Pirate treasure? Skepticism crept back. No. Jasper traced the line. Not treasure. Evidence. The bones of the founders. I froze. If the founder was a pirate, I whispered, and he killed the real settlers, then the bodies are somewhere in that swamp, Jasper finished. If Gills was digging them up. Arthur dropped a building on him. We sat in silence. Cheerful cafe chatter swirled around us. We have to go to the crypt, I said. The Penhaligon family crypt. If Arthur is hiding history, that's where he'd keep the good map. The one showing where the bodies are buried. Break into a mausoleum? Tonight? Storm is coming, I pointed out the window. Sky outside turned bruised purple. Lightning flickered. If that storm hits, the sinking grounds flood. Evidence gone by morning. Jasper looked at me. Looked at his half-eaten scone. Looked at his tweed vest. I need to change shoes, he said seriously. That's a yes? I'm not ruining vintage Oxfords in a bog. He stood, clutching the ledger to his chest. Pick me up in 10 minutes. I have galoshes. Galoshes? Rubber boots, Merritt. Don't judge. Excellent tread. He marched toward the door, skinny and determined, holding the evidence of a century-old conspiracy like an overdue library book. I finished my black coffee in one long, burning gulp. I wasn't crazy. I had a partner who believed in claw marks, a clue damp with swamp water, and a terrified archivist who prioritized footwear over safety. We were going to catch a librarian. Chapter 7. Silence in the Stacks. The Athenaeum didn't close. It just became more judgmental after dark. We parked V's truck around the back, in the shadow of the ficus trees. Jasper had changed into black rubber boots that reached his knees. High-gloss Wellingtons that squeaked with every step. "Stop it," I whispered. "I'm nervous," Jasper squeaked again, clutching the ledger to his chest like a shield. "We're breaking into a library, Merritt. I have a key. I work here. But doing it at night feels illicit, like we're going to overstay our welcome in the reference section." "We're not breaking in," I said, cutting the engine. "The lights are on in the director's office. We're concerned citizens returning lost property." We got out. The wind picked up, whipping palmetto fronds against the limestone walls with a dry rattle. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, purple and black, threatening a storm that would drown the county. We didn't use the key. The side door was unlocked. "That's careless," Jasper muttered, offended. "He never leaves the staff entrance unlocked. It compromises the humidity seal." We slipped inside. The silence of a library is specific. It's not the empty silence of a house or the dead silence of a crypt. It's a holding silence. Thousands of words pressing against their covers, waiting to be read. The air was frigid. Industrial AC hummed through the vents, smelling of old paper and lemon polish. We walked past the darkened circulation desk, past the towering stacks of local history, toward the pool of yellow light spilling from the director's office. Arthur Penhaligon sat behind his mahogany desk. He wasn't working. He was just sitting, hands folded on the green blotter, white cotton gloves, spotless. He looked up as we appeared in the doorway. He didn't jump, didn't blink. "Mr. Abernathy," Arthur said. His voice was dry paper sliding over dry wood. "And Ms. Vance, I assume you're not here to pay a late fee." "We found something," I said. I stepped into the room. "In the swamp." Jasper placed the ledger on the desk. He did it gently, despite his shaking hands. Arthur looked at the black oilcloth. He didn't touch it. "A ledger," Arthur observed. 1890. My great-grandfather's hand. Where did you acquire this?" "In the reeds," Jasper said, finding his voice. "Near the Gills site. It details payments, Arthur. Payments for a displacement. For moving bodies." Arthur stood up. He was a small man, narrow shoulders, thin neck. He looked like a strong wind would snap him in half. He walked to the window, looking out at the gathering storm. "History is a conversation, Jasper," Arthur said softly. "Sometimes sources are unreliable. Thaddeus Penhaligon was a meticulous man, but he was also prone to exaggeration. Displacement likely refers to the drainage canals. Moving mud, not men." "It says silence," I pointed out. "Cost, 100 gold sovereigns. You don't pay councilmen for silence about drainage ditches." Arthur turned. His eyes were pale gray, magnified by his wire-rimmed glasses. He looked at me with a mild, pitying expression. "You have the Vance imagination, Merritt. It's a family trait. Your Uncle Rourke has it too. Seeing conspiracies where there is only civil engineering." "Don't bring Rourke into this." "I mention him only out of concern," Arthur said smoothly. "Stress is bad for the heart. And for the mind. Digging up old rumors, alleging that the founding families were criminals. It upsets people. It upsets funding." He walked back to the desk. He picked up a book lying next to the ledger. It wasn't a history book. It was a textbook. Simple machines and the mechanics of force. I frowned. Why was the head of the Historical Society reading high school physics? Arthur noticed my look. He tapped the cover. Structural integrity. The library foundation is settling. I like to understand the forces at play before I call a contractor. Leverage, Ms. Vance. It's all about leverage. Gills didn't die from leverage, I said. He was murdered. He died in an accident, Arthur corrected. Because he was careless. He didn't respect the ground he was standing on. He picked up the ledger. He didn't open it. He just held it, testing its weight. This is stolen property, Arthur said. Taken from the archives years ago. I'm glad you returned it. I'll see that it's properly filed. Filed? Jasper squeaked. You mean hidden? Like the 1890 map? Arthur smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Go home, Jasper. It's going to storm. And these old roads? They wash out so easily. It wasn't a threat. It was a probability. But the way he said it made the hair on my arm stand up. Come on, I said, grabbing Jasper's arm. But the map, Jasper started. We're leaving, I said sharply. I pulled him out of the office back into the dark stacks. We walked fast. I didn't breathe until we were outside, in the humid, heavy night. He kept it, Jasper whispered, staring at the closed door. He took the evidence. He took a book, I said, marching to the truck. But he gave us something else. What? A lecture on civil engineering? No, I said, climbing into the driver's seat. He admitted the 1890 map exists. He didn't deny it. He just deflected. And the physics book? Jasper climbed in, his boots squeaking against the floor mat. Why was he reading about levers? I started the engine. The headlights cut through the gloom. Because he's small, Jasper, I said, putting the truck in gear. He couldn't lift a 400-pound stone, but he could tip it, with a lever and a fulcrum. Jasper went pale. Oh God, it wasn't an accident, it was a math problem. Exactly, I said. And if he's willing to use physics to kill Gills, he won't hesitate to use a flood to hide the rest. The crypt, Jasper realized. If the storm hits. We have to beat him to the punch, I said. We need to find out what else he's hiding before the water covers it up. But we don't know where to look, Jasper wailed. We don't have the map. No, I said, feeling the hum buzz in my jaw like a compass needle finding north. But I have something better. I have a migraine, and right now it's pointing straight at the Penhaligon family plot. Jasper looked at me. He looked at the storm clouds. He adjusted his glasses. I hate physics, he said. I drove toward the cemetery. The rain started to fall. First slow, fat drops, then a deluge. Chapter 8. Drones and Decoys. The rain didn't fall. It arrived. A solid curtain of water turning the world gray and frantic. I parked the truck 3 blocks from the main gate, tucked behind a stand of palmettos. Wipers fought a losing battle, slapping back and forth in a rhythm matching Jasper's shallow breathing. We shouldn't be here, Jasper said, gripping the dashboard. This is a hurricane, or a tropical depression, or just God telling us to go home. It's a squall, I said, grabbing my flashlight. It'll pass. The tide won't. If there's evidence in the Penhaligon crypt, it's underwater in an hour. And if we're in the crypt when it floods? We tread water. Come on. We exited the truck into the deluge. Wind tore at my jacket. Within seconds, I was soaked. Jasper's tweed vest was instantly heavy, smelling of wet wool and regret. His galoshes, however, performed admirably. The main gate of the Boneyard was locked. Heavy iron chain looped through the bars. Locked, Jasper shouted. See? Sign from God. Sign from the night watchman, I corrected. We go over. The wall is 6 feet high, covered in slippery moss. I have 0 upper body strength. I have enough for both of us, Give me your foot. I boosted the archivist over the wall. He landed with a wet thud and a yelp. I followed, pulling myself up on iron spikes and dropping into the mud. The cemetery was transformed. Paths were rivers. Crypts were islands in a rising sea of black water. Spanish moss whipped in the wind like banshee hair. Which way? Jasper asked, wiping water from his glasses. Feudal. North, I pointed. Penhaligon plot is on the ridge, near the sinking grounds. We trudged through muck. Mud sucked at our boots, trying to pull them off. Exhausting work. Every step a battle. Then I saw it. A light. It hovered in the distance near the Gills site. Pale green orb, 6 feet off the ground. Bobbing silently through the rain. I froze. Jasper collided with my back. Oof! Why did we? He stopped. Saw the light. Is that? His voice went high. Is that the Elwha? No, I said, squinting. The Loa felt heavy, cold. This feels... The hum was silent. No static. No pressure. Empty. The light moved. Drifted closer, weaving between headstones. A second green orb joined it, floating out of the cypress trees. Will-o'-the-wisps, Jasper whispered. Swamp gas, ignis fatuus, lures travelers into the bog to drown. Jasper, swamp gas doesn't move in formation. The lights banked sharply, turned toward us. They see us! Jasper grabbed my arm. Run! Wait. I tracked the movement. Smooth, mechanical. And there was a sound. Low, buzzing whine cutting through the wind. Zzzt. That's not a ghost, I said. Anger replaced fear. That's a rotor. The light swooped, dived toward us. I raised my flashlight, aiming the beam at the lead orb. Light hit plastic. 4 rotors spinning in a blur of rain. A camera lens glowing red. Drones! I shouted. Drones! Jasper blinked. Who flies drones in a hurricane? Someone who wants to scare people away, or watch them. The lead drone hovered 10 feet away, camera fixing on us. A voice, tinny and amplified, crackled from a speaker on its chassis. Restricted area. Leave immediately. Private property. Private property? I yelled. This is a municipal cemetery, you flying toaster? The drone dipped. Aggressive. Buzzed lower. Blades kicking up spray. Hurting us. Pushing us back toward the gate. Gills security drones, I realized. From the construction site. Automated patrol loop. They're very aggressive. Jasper ducked as the second drone swooped his head, buzzing his hair. Programmed to protect the site. And right now, the site is where the evidence is. We can't outrun them in this mud, Jasper yelled. They'll track us. We don't need to outrun them. We need to ground them. How? Do you have an EMP device? No. I have a gravedigger. I whistled. Sharp, piercing sound cutting through the storm. Nothing happened. What was that? Calling cavalry. Drones circled, buzzing louder. Leave immediately. From the darkness of the maintenance shed, a shape emerged. Hulking, rain-slicked, moving fast, spade, released. Escaped. Didn't care. He was here. He held a rake. Massive, iron-toothed landscape rake. He saw the drones. Saw me. Didn't smile. Just grunted. Low sound of pure annoyance, and swung the rake like a baseball bat. Crack. Lead drone exploded in a shower of plastic and sparks, spiraled into the mud, twitching. Second drone paused. Camera swiveled toward Spade. Spade roared, raising the rake. The drone, deciding its algorithm didn't cover angry giant with farm equipment, banked sharply and zipped into the trees. Spade walked to the downed drone, stomped on it. Crunch. Spade. I ran over. You're out? He nodded, pointed at his wrist, no watch, then at the gate, released. Thank God, I said. Spade. This is Jasper. Jasper. Spade. Jasper looked at the man who had just swatted a robot out of the sky. A pleasure, he squeaked. Spade looked at Jasper's boots, nodded approvingly. Good tread. He pointed at the gills site, then made a digging motion. Dig? No, I said. Not digging. Searching. We need to get into the Penhaligon crypt, the old one on the ridge. Spade frowned, shook his head, made a crazy gesture around his ears. Bad place. I know, I said. Bad juju. But Arthur is hiding something there. If we don't find it before the water rises, Gills's death stays on you. Spade looked at the mud, looked at the smashed drone, looked at me. He turned and started walking toward the ridge, waved for us to follow. He's helping us? Jasper asked, jogging to keep up. He hates robots, I said, and I think he hates Arthur Penhaligon even more. We followed the grave digger into the dark, leaving the broken drone to spark and die in the mud. The ghost lights were gone. The real haunting was ahead. Chapter 9. The Bone House. The Penhaligon crypt stood on the highest ridge of the Boneyard, which, given the flood, was now barely an island. It was a monstrosity of Victorian Gothic ego, gray granite, gargoyles with eroded faces, and iron doors that looked like they hadn't opened since Taft was president. It's sealed, Jasper shouted over the wind. The rain was torrential now, drowning the world. Lead seal on the lock mechanism. Arthur checked it last week. Lead is soft, I said. Spade? Spade stepped up. He looked at the lock, a heavy iron padlock crusted with rust and official seals. He didn't use the rake. He pulled a pry bar from his belt. A beautiful, terrifying piece of steel. He jammed it into the hasp. Grunted. Veins popped on his thick neck. S-N-A-P. The lock shattered. The chains fell away with a heavy clatter. Spade pushed the doors. They groaned, stone grinding on stone, and swung inward, exhaling a breath of cold, dead air. We stepped inside. The silence was instant. The stone walls cut off the wind, the rain, the drone of the insects. It was dead quiet. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the dust motes. It was a standard crypt. Marble shelves, locally, lined the walls, each holding a casket. Names etched in gold leaf. Thaddeus Penhaligon, Martha Penhaligon, Arthur Penhaligon Sr. Respectable, Jasper whispered, his voice echoing. Ordered, chronological. And dry, I noted. The floor is dry. Arthur said it would flood. I walked to the center of the floor. It was a mosaic of black and white tiles. A compass rose. Spade, I said. Tap the floor. Spade walked to the center. He stomped his boot on the north point of the compass. Thump. Solid. He moved to the east point. Thump. Solid. He moved to the south point, the point facing the swamp. Thoom. Hollow. A drum beat from the earth. Bingo, I said. Spade knelt. He jammed the pry bar between the tiles. He leaned his weight on it. The stone screeched, a sound like a banshee dying, and a slab of the floor lifted. Beneath the tiles, there wasn't dirt. There was a staircase. Rough-cut stone steps descending into darkness. A lower chamber? Jasper peered over the edge. Penhaligons don't have lower chambers. The water table is too high. Unless they built a cofferdam. I remembered the ledger. Lumber for cofferdam. Labor for night dredging. I shined the light down. We go down, I said. I hate going down, Jasper muttered, seeking the first step. The air in the lower chamber smelled different. Not dry. It smelled of brine, wet wood, and something else. Sweet and cloying. We reached the bottom. The room was small, circular. The walls were made of old, handmade bricks, slick with moisture. And in the center, there was no casket. There was a pile. At first, my brain refused to process it. I thought it was driftwood, tangled, bleached branches stacked in a heap. Then I saw a skull, then another. They weren't laid out. They were discarded, piled like refuse. Rib cages interlocked with femurs, jawbones separated from skulls. Oh God, Jasper choked, covering his mouth. I walked closer, forcing myself to look. These weren't fresh. They were old, very old. Who are they? I whispered. Jasper forced himself to look. He pointed a shaking finger at a scrap of fabric clinging to a rib cage. Indigo wool, he whispered. Silver buttons. Merritt. That's a colonial militia uniform. He moved his light. And that's a rosary. Catholic. The original settlers, I realized. The ones the history books say died of swamp fever. They didn't die of fever, I said, pointing to a skull. The parietal bone was crushed inward. Blunt force. That one was shot. The pirate's tithe, Jasper said, his voice trembling with horror. The founder, Captain Rackham, he didn't found the town. He took it. He killed the settlers who were already here and dumped them in a mass grave. And the Penhaligons built their family crypt on top of it, I finished, literally standing on the bones of the people they murdered. Spade made a low, growling noise in his throat. He was staring at the wall. I turned. There was a plaque. Bronze, tarnished black, bolted to the brick. In memory of the displacement, 1890. Constructed by A. Penhaligon. Maintained by R. Vance. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Vance, I whispered. R. Vance, Jasper read. Rourke? No, I said quickly. Rourke is old, but he's not 1890 old. That's his grandfather, Randolph Vance. Maintained, Jasper noted. That implies continuity. Merritt, if your family maintained this secret. Rourke knows, I said. The realization hit me harder than the smell. He knows everything. He knows about the mass grave. He knows the Penhaligons are frauds. That's what he was protecting. Not just protecting, Jasper said softly. Complicit. A sound from above stopped us. A clank. Metal on stone. Then a rushing sound. Like a waterfall. Water! Spade shouted. He pointed up the stairs. A torrent of black water was pouring through the open floor slab. The seal! I shouted. Outside. Someone broke the drainage seal. Or Arthur was right. The storm surge. Up! I grabbed Jasper. Move! We scrambled up the stone steps. The water hit us, freezing, foul, smelling of the swamp. It wasn't rising slowly. It was surging. Spade reached the top first. He braced his shoulder against the stone slab we'd pried open. He shoved. But the slab didn't move. Blocked? I yelled. Spade grunted, heavy. Arthur, I snarled. He followed us. He closed the slab and parked something on top of it. Physics! Jasper shrieked. He's using leverage against us. The water rose to our knees, then our waists. The lower chamber was filling. The skulls below were floating, swirling in a macabre dance. Push! I wedged myself next to Spade. On 3, 1, 2, hard. We shoved. The stone didn't budge. It's no use, Jasper cried. The water pressure. And if he blocked it. I looked around the crypt. the loculi, the shelves. The vents! I pointed to the bronze grates near the ceiling of the upper chamber. They were high, narrow, but open to the air. We can't fit through those, Jasper said. No, I said, but we can scream through them. Who's going to hear us? The drones? No, I said, feeling the hum buzz violently in my teeth. We don't need to scream for help. We need to scream for pressure. I looked at the water rushing in. This chamber, I said breathless. If we seal the lower door, the air pressure in here will rise. It might pop the roof slab if the mortar is weak. Or it might crush our eardrums, Jasper noted. Spade. I pointed to the stone slab leading to the bone pit. Can we close it? Spade looked at the rushing water. He understood. He grabbed the edge of the floor slab and pulled. It slammed shut, sealing the lower chamber. The rushing stopped, but the water was already waist deep in the main crypt. We were trapped. Check the walls, I ordered. Look for a weakness, a crack, anything. Jasper was frantically scanning the inscriptions. Merritt, he said, his voice odd. Look at this one. He pointed to a small marble plaque near the floor. It wasn't a Penhaligon name. It was etched crudely. Spade. Just the word. No dates. I looked at the gravedigger. He was standing by the door, water lapping at his belt. He wasn't panicking. He was waiting. Spade? I asked. Is this your family? He didn't speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He opened it. Brick dust. He poured it into the rising water. Protect, he rumbled, his first word. The crypt shook. Not from the storm. From below. And then the water started to glow. Chapter 10. Storm warning. The water glowed a sickly electric blue. Bioluminescence, Jasper wheezed, clinging to the top tier of the marble shelves. He was perched precariously next to Martha Penhaligon, 1845 to 1902. Dinoflagellates, disturbed by the current. It's perfectly natural. It's weirdly pretty, I said, treading water in the center of the crypt, for a death trap. The water was chest high now, cold enough to make my teeth chatter, but the adrenaline kept the shivering at bay. Spade stood heavily by the sealed door, water lapping at his chest. He hadn't moved since pouring the brick dust. He was staring at the door with a terrifying intensity, as if daring the stone to disobey him. We have maybe 10 minutes, I said, checking the water line against the wall. Before the air pocket gets too small. I don't hold my breath well, Jasper confessed. I have a deviated septum. We're not going to drown, I promised, though I wasn't sure how to keep it. The hum was back. Not the angry buzz of murder, but a low, throbbing ache. It felt like the pressure in the room. Heavy. Compressing. We need leverage, I said, looking at the ceiling. The stone slabs of the roof were heavy, wet, and sealed with moss. Arthur blocked the door, but he didn't block the roof. We can't reach the roof, Jasper pointed out, and even if we could, we can't lift a ton of granite while treading water. We don't lift, I said, remembering Arthur's smug lecture. We wedge. I dove. The water was murky, glowing with that strange blue light. I swam down to the floor, my hands searching the debris. I needed something solid, something long. My hand brushed metal, the pry bar. Spade had dropped it when the water rushed in. I grabbed it and kicked up, breaking the surface with a gasp. Spade, I shouted. The sarcophagus, the big one on the bottom shelf. Spade looked at me. He looked at the massive stone coffin of Thaddeus Penhaligon. Tip it, I ordered. Spade didn't ask why. He waded over, submerging himself to the shoulders. He gripped the edge of the stone coffin. He roared, a sound that echoed off the wet walls, and shoved. The coffin groaned. It scraped against the stone shelf. "More!" I yelled. "Jasper, help him!" Jasper dropped from his perch, splashing into the water. "I have the upper body strength of a damp noodle. Just push." Together, the gravedigger and the archivist shoved. The heavy stone box slid inch by inch. Then, with a grinding slide, it tipped. It didn't fall flat. It fell at an angle, one end resting on the floor, the other wedged against the opposite shelf. It formed a ramp. "Climb!" I ordered Spade. Spade scrambled up the slick stone surface of the coffin. He stood on the high end, his head now just feet from the ceiling slabs. "The bar!" I tossed him the pry bar. He caught it. "Find the seam," I instructed. "Between the slabs. Jam it in." Spade drove the steel bar into the mortar joint of the roof. He hammered it with his palm until it bit deep. "Now," I said. "We wait." "Wait for what?" Jasper asked, shivering violently next to me in the water. "For the water to do the work," I said. "Hydraulic pressure. As the water rises, it compresses the air. The air pushes up. Spade pushes the wedge. The seal breaks." That's actually sound physics," Jasper said, sounding surprised. "Archimedes would be proud." We waited. The water rose. Neck high, chin high. Spade was crouched on the coffin, head pressed against the ceiling, hand on the bar. I looked at Jasper. His teeth were chattering so hard I could hear them. He looked like a drowned rat in expensive eyewear. "Hey," I said softly. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, magnified by the wet lenses. "If we don't," he started. "We will." I cut him off. "But thank you for coming. For the galoshes." "They were on sale," he stammered. "And I didn't want you to be right alone." I reached out underwater and took his hand. His fingers were icy, but he squeezed back, hard. "I saw the bear," I whispered. "Your bear. In the woods." "You did?" "Metaphorically, I believe you. About the claw marks." Jasper smiled, a small, terrified, genuine smile. "I believe you too. About the lady on the angel." Creak. The sound came from above. The pressure was building. The air was running out. "Spade!" I yelled. "Now!" Spade stood up on the coffin. He grabbed the pry bar with both hands. He didn't just push. He hung on it, using his entire massive weight as a counter lever. The bar bent. The mortar cracked. P-O-P. A sound like a gunshot. The seal broke. A rush of pressurized air hissed out, and the heavy roof slab shifted. Rain poured in. Fresh, cold, beautiful rain. "Push!" I screamed. Spade gave a final, primal roar and shoved upward. The slab slid aside, grinding over the edge of the wall. Open sky. Gray, stormy, wonderful sky. Spade hauled himself up through the hole. He vanished for a second, then his face appeared, rimmed with lightning. He reached a massive hand down. I grabbed Jasper. "You first!" "Ladies first." "I'm not a lady, I'm a mason. Go!" I shoved him up. Spade grabbed Jasper's tweed vest and hauled him out like a wet kitten. Jasper flopped onto the roof, gasping. Then the hand came back for me. I took it. Spade pulled me up with effortless strength. I scrambled onto the wet granite roof of the crypt, coughing up swamp water. I rolled onto my back, letting the rain wash the grave muck from my face. I had never felt anything so good. Jasper was lying next to me, staring at the sky. "We're alive," he noted. "We're alive," I agreed. "And we have the map," Jasper tapped his head. I memorized it while we were down there. I looked at him. You memorized the survey? Spatial memory. He tapped his temple. It's why I'm a good archivist. I noticed the coordinates on the plaque. The displacement point isn't just under the crypt. It extends. Extends where? To the sinking grounds. Jasper sat up. To the maintenance shed, to the main gate. The whole cemetery, I realized. The whole boneyard is the mass grave. And Arthur knows it, Jasper said. That's why he rigged the angel. Gills was digging near the edge. If he exposed one bone, he'd expose 1,000. I sat up. I looked across the stormy cemetery. The water was receding slightly as the tide turned, leaving a landscape of slick mud and tilted stones. And there, standing by the Gills mausoleum, was a figure. Arthur. He was wearing a yellow raincoat. He held a shovel. He wasn't running. He was waiting. Spade stood up. He cracked his knuckles. One more ghost to bust, I said, standing up. My legs shook, but the hum was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Let's go finish this. Chapter 11. Mud and Madness. We slid down the roof of the crypt, hitting the mud with 3 distinct splashes. Spade landed like a boulder. I landed like a sack of cement, and Jasper landed like a collection of sticks held together by tweed. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I rolled, gasping, tasting decay and rain. The storm had evolved. It was no longer just weather. It was a physical assault. The rain was horizontal, driven by a wind that screamed through the cypress trees like a bandsaw cutting metal. He's at the Gill site, I yelled, wiping sludge from my eyes. He's going to drop the rest of the mausoleum. To hide the evidence? Jasper shouted back, struggling to stand in the knee-deep muck. To crush the bone layer! I pointed north, where the silhouette of the ruined Gills mausoleum stood against the lightning-bruised sky. If that structure slides into the swamp, it takes the whole ridge with it. The bones, the map coordinates, everything vanishes into the muck. We have to run, Jasper said, looking at his boots. I don't think I can run. You don't have to run. I grabbed his arm. You just have to move. Come on. We moved. Traversing the sinking grounds during a hurricane isn't a jog. It's a war against geology. The ground was soup. The clay, usually solid enough to walk on, had liquefied. Every step was a gamble. My boots found no purchase, just sliding layers of silt and rot. Twice I went down to one knee. Once, Spade had to haul me out of a sinkhole that opened up like a hungry mouth. We fought through the sawgrass, the sharp blades whipping our faces. The lightning flashed, strobe lights on a horror movie set, revealing the destruction. Headstones had toppled. Urns lay shattered. The dead were being rearranged by the elements. Arthur Penhaligon stood by the remaining wall of the Gills mausoleum. He looked absurdly small against the storm. His yellow raincoat was a bright, toxic smear in the gray dark. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't panicked. He was methodical. He held a shovel, a long-handled, heavy-gauge steel spade. He wasn't digging. He was jamming the blade under the corner of the massive foundation slab. Stop! I screamed, skidding to a halt 10 yards away. Arthur looked up. Rain streamed off his glasses, distorting his eyes into pale gray blurs. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed, like we were noisy patrons in the reading room who had interrupted his filing. You're persistent, Ms. Vance, he called out. His voice was thin but carried over the wind with chilling clarity. I assumed the crypt would hold you. The ventilation calculations were marginal. We made our own ventilation, I said, stepping forward. The mud sucked at my ankles, holding me back. Step away from the wall, Arthur. It's over. We saw the bones. We know about the displacement. It's never over, Arthur said. He leaned his weight on the shovel handle. The massive stone slab groaned, a deep tectonic sound that vibrated in my chest. Mud bubbled up around the base, thick and gray. History is heavy, Merritt. It requires maintenance. It requires murder? Jasper squeaked, stepping up beside me. He looked terrified, soaking wet, and surprisingly fierce. You killed Preston Gills because he was going to expose the displacement. You dropped a statue on him. I killed him because he was a fool. Arthur snapped. He wanted to drain the swamp. He wanted to put pylons down into the bedrock. He didn't understand that the water is the only thing holding this town together. The water keeps the secret. If he drained the bog, the bones would be exposed. The Penhaligon legacy would be nothing but piracy and slaughter. He adjusted his grip on the shovel. He put a foot on the shoulder of the blade. He prepared to jump. If I drop this, Arthur said calmly, the vibration triggers a liquefaction event. The clay layer shears. The entire sector slides into the bayou, including you. And you, I noted. You're standing on the slide zone. I am the captain of this ship. Arthur smiled thinly. I go down with the archives. Spade roared. It wasn't a word. It was a sound of pure, primal, territorial rage. This was his graveyard. These were his dead. And Arthur was treating them like leverage. Spade charged. He moved faster than a man that size should move, a tank plowing through the mud. No, I shouted. Spade, wait. Arthur didn't flinch. He didn't try to fight. He just shifted his weight. Spade hit a patch of slick clay 10 feet from Arthur. His momentum betrayed him. He slid, feet flying up, and crashed hard into the side of a granite tombstone. Crack. Spade went down in a heap of mud and groans, clutching his shoulder. Physics, Mr. Spade, Arthur tutted, shaking his head. Friction coefficients are low tonight. You should have calculated the vector. He looked back at us. He raised the shovel to strike the fulcrum point. Goodbye, Miss Vance. I looked at the wall. It was tilting. The wedge Arthur had inserted, a piece of heart pine, probably salvaged from the original coffin lumber, was bowing under the pressure. He was using a Class 1 lever, load on one side, the wall. Effort on the other, his weight. Fulcrum in the middle, the fulcrum. I squinted through the rain. The shovel wasn't resting on the ground. It was pivoting on a stone. A small, square piece of granite he had placed under the shaft to give him leverage. Jasper, I whispered, distract him. How? Jasper stared at the killer. He has a shovel and a death wish. I have a wet vest. Quote history at him, correct his grammar. Anything to break his concentration. I dropped into a crouch, circling wide to the left. The mud was deeper here, softer. I moved slow, trying to look like I was retreating. Jasper stepped forward. He stood straight, rain plastering his hair to his skull. He looked terrified. He looked like a librarian facing a barbarian horde. He pointed a shaking finger at Arthur. Actually, Jasper shouted, his voice cracking. Captain Rackham wasn't a captain. His commission was revoked in 1789 for cowardice. He was a cook, a glorified salad tosser. Arthur froze. The insult to the legacy hit him harder than a bullet. His foot hovered over the shovel blade. Lies, Arthur hissed. Slander. He was a hero of the Battle of... I saw the manifest, Jasper yelled, gaining confidence. He took another step. He died of syphilis in a brothel in Tampa. He didn't found anything except a colony of lice, and his ship wasn't the Victory. It was the Saucy Sioux. Enough! Arthur screamed. He took his foot off the shovel to point at Jasper. You ungrateful little shredder, I gave you a career. That was the mistake. He stopped looking at the physics. He looked at the insult. I didn't charge him. I charged the ground. I dove, sliding on my stomach through the muck like an otter. I wasn't aiming for Arthur. I wasn't aiming for the shovel handle. I was aiming for the fulcrum stone. I hit it with the heel of my boot. Hard. Thwack. The stone skittered away, sliding into the mud. The shovel slipped. Without the pivot point, the lever became useless. Arthur lurched forward, his weight suddenly unsupported. He flailed, trying to catch the handle, but the leverage was gone. Gravity took over. He fell face first into the mud. The sudden shift in weight jarred the wall. The vibration Arthur had threatened. It happened. But not the way he planned. The stone slab above him groaned. It tilted. Move! I rolled away, scrambling backward through the slime. The slab didn't fall. It slid. It came down like a slow guillotine blade, heavy, inevitable, grinding against the foundation. Arthur tried to scramble up, but the mud held him. The suction was too strong. His yellow raincoat snagged on a root. The slab slammed down. It missed his head. It missed his chest. It buried the lower half of his legs in the muck. It didn't crush him. The soft ground saved his bones from shattering, but it pinned him. It trapped him like a bug under a thumb. No! Arthur shrieked, clawing at the stone. My legs! My legacy! He thrashed, trying to pull free. But the stone weighed tons. He was anchored to the earth he had tried to manipulate. I stood up, wiping mud from my face. My breath came in ragged gasps. I walked over to him. Arthur looked up at me. His glasses were gone. His face was a mask of mud and terror. Help me, he begged. Lift it. Use the leverage. Use the shovel. I looked at the shovel lying in the mud. I picked it up. It was heavy. Cold steel. Arthur flinched, covering his head with his hands. I didn't hit him. I jammed the blade into the ground next to his head, deep into the clay. An anchor. A marker. Physics, Arthur, I said, looking down at him. Action and reaction. You push the dead. The dead pushed back. The water is rising, Arthur cried. I'll drown. You said you were the captain, I reminded him. Captains go down with the ship. Spade limped over, rubbing his shoulder. He looked at Arthur pinned in the mud. He looked at the tilting wall. He grinned. A gap-toothed, muddy, beautiful grin. He reached down and patted the stone slab as if thanking it. Jasper waded over, looking down at the defeated librarian. He adjusted his glasses, which were miraculously still on his face. Also, Jasper said calmly to the screaming man, it wasn't syphilis. It was gout. But I thought the syphilis would sting more. I looked at Jasper. You lied? I embellished. Jasper shrugged. I'm an archivist, Merritt. We control the narrative. We fight dirty. You're evil, I said admiringly. I tried to be polite, Jasper said. Politeness failed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue lights flashed against the rain-soaked trees, cutting through the storm. Pasco. I leaned against the tilting wall, the adrenaline draining out of me, leaving me shaking. My hands trembled. My knees felt like water. The storm raged on. The rain still fell. But the hum. I closed my eyes and listened. The hum was quiet. The static in my teeth was gone. The pressure in my skull had lifted. The dead were satisfied. Let's get coffee, I said, opening my eyes, and maybe dry socks. God, yes, Jasper agreed, looking down at his ruined tweed. 3 pairs, and a scone, a very large scone. We stood in the rain, watching the police lights draw closer, guarding the mud until the law arrived to collect the trash. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. The sun came up like an apology. Bright, apologetic yellow light that tried to convince everyone the night before hadn't happened. It failed. The Fallows looked like it had been shaken in a snow globe filled with mud. Palm fronds littered the streets like green confetti. The drainage ditches were swollen, black water lapping at the sidewalks. The air smelled of ozone, wet rot, and the peculiar, sharp scent of adrenaline fading. I walked down Main Street. I wasn't limping exactly, but my right knee clicked with every step, a souvenir from sliding down a mausoleum roof. I was clean. I had scrubbed the grave dirt from my fingernails with a bristled brush until my skin was raw. I wore dry jeans, a clean flannel shirt, and boots that didn't squelch. I felt hollow. Good hollow. Like a bell that had stopped ringing. The town was awake. Gossip travels faster than storm surges in the Fallows. I passed Wick and Wire, where Orion Pates was sweeping debris from his sidewalk. He saw me. For the first time ever, he didn't offer me a discount on sage. He just nodded, a curt, respectful dip of the head, and went back to sweeping. He knew. Everyone knew. I stopped at the corner of Elm and River. The Victorian mansion of the Vance family stood behind its iron fence, looking unimpressed by the weather. I needed to see Rourke. I found him in the sunroom. He was sitting in his wicker chair, a cup of tea untouched on the table next to him. He was staring at the newspaper. Librarian arrested in cemetery collapse. Structural sabotage, says police. He looked up as I entered. He looked older today. The lines around his eyes were deeper, etched by a night of worry I hadn't been there to alleviate. Merritt, he said softly. I'm okay, Uncle. He stood up, stiffly, leaning on his cane, and walked over to me. He didn't hug me. Vances aren't huggers. He gripped my shoulders, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at my face, searching for the hum, for the madness, for the crack in the facade. The crypt, he said. The radio said the Penhaligon crypt was compromised. It flooded, I said. We got out, me and Jasper, and Spade. And Arthur? Arthur is in the hospital, under guard. His legs are broken. Rourke exhaled. He let go of my shoulders and sat back down, heavily. Arthur Penhaligon, a man who wouldn't step on a beetle because it disrupts the ecosystem, and yet... He wanted to protect the legacy, I said. He knew about the displacement, Rourke. He knew about the mass grave. I watched him carefully. This was the test. Rourke didn't flinch. He just nodded, closing his eyes. We all knew, in the abstract. The pirate's tithe was a story we told ourselves to justify the wealth. We didn't want to know it was literal bones. It wasn't abstract last night, I said. It was very literal. I saw them. I know. He opened his eyes. They were sad, but clear. And the rest? The atmosphere? He was asking about the Elwha, about the hum. Gone, I lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. The pressure is gone. The dead are quiet. He looked at me for a long moment. He knew I was holding back. He knew I had seen Maman Brigitte. But he also knew that speaking it gave it power. Good, Rourke said. He picked up his tea. Then it's just a murder case. A tragedy. But a human one. Just human, I agreed. I kissed him on the forehead, a rare gesture that made him blink, and left. The secret of the bloodline was safe. For now. The Fog Cutter Cafe was quiet. The storm had knocked out the power to half the town, but Maeve O'Connell had a gas stove and an intolerance for excuses. The coffee was hot. The beignets were fresh. The air conditioning was off, leaving the room smelling of humidity and powdered sugar. I sat at the wobbly corner table. You look human, V. Suter said, sliding into the chair opposite me. She slapped a copy of the Gazette onto the table. Mostly. Thanks, I said. There was a photo of Arthur being loaded into an ambulance, looking small and muddy and furious, and below it, a smaller photo of Detective Pascoe pointing at the sinking grounds with an expression of weary competence. Pascoe is taking the credit, V noted. He says he suspected the instability all along. He's calling it geological forensics. Let him have it, I said, tearing a beignet in half. Steam rose from the dough. He has to fill out the paperwork. I just want to lay brick. If he takes the credit, he takes the press conferences. And Spade? Released, I said. Charges dropped. He's back at work. Currently trying to repair the Gills Angel with duct tape and optimism. I told him I'd come by later to do it right. He came through, V. He saved us. I know, V smiled, stealing a piece of my beignet. I saw him this morning. He was wearing a new watch. Waterproof. The door opened. The bells jingled aggressively. Jasper Abernathy walked in. The conversation in the cafe didn't stop, but it shifted. Heads turned. Everyone knew he was the one who had been in the crypt, the gentle archivist who had taken down the director. He wasn't wearing tweed. He was wearing jeans. Dark wash, stiff, clearly bought an hour ago, and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and canvas sneakers, Converse. He looked lighter, like the weight of the Penhaligon legacy. All those leather-bound secrets had been lifted off his narrow shoulders. He spotted us and walked over. He was carrying a small brown paper bag. Morning, Merritt. V. Jasper. V grinned, leaning back. Nice ankles. I didn't know you owned denim. Is the world ending? It was an emergency purchase, Jasper said, sitting down. He seemed unsure of how to sit in jeans. He kept adjusting the knees. My suit is unrecoverable. The dry cleaner actually laughed at me. He took a photo for his wall of shame. How is the library? I asked. Closed, Jasper said. Police tape everywhere. The board is in emergency session. They're talking about naming me interim director. Interim Director Abernathy. I tested the sound of it. Scary. Terrifying, he agreed, wiping his glasses. I have to hire a new structural engineer and recatalog the entire 1890s collection, since half of it turns out to be creatively edited. And I have to deal with the press. Just tell them it was ghosts, V suggested. They love that. I'm sticking with saturated soil mechanics, Jasper said. It's less sensational. He slid the paper bag across the table to me. I brought you something. I looked at the bag. It was grease-stained from the beignets I was eating, but the bag itself was crisp. Is it an indictment? No, it's a peace offering for the muddy boots and the near-death experience. I opened the bag. Inside was a book. Not an old, dusty tome from the archives. A new paperback. Victorian Funeral Customs and the Art of Mourning. I flipped it open. On the title page, in neat archivist handwriting that I now recognized as easily as my own, to Merritt. Who knows that the dead don't stay buried, but the past should? I looked up. Jasper was blushing, a furious, bright red that clashed with his hair. He looked specifically at the sugar dispenser. It has a chapter on stone carving, he mumbled. I thought, you might find the iconography interesting, the symbolism of broken columns and weeping willows, since that's your job. You bought me a book about death, I said. Is it too much? He panicked slightly, his hands fluttering. I can return it. They have a return policy. I can get you a gift card or a plant. A succulent? Succulents are low maintenance. No, I said, closing the book. I ran my thumb over the glossy cover. It's perfect. Thank you, nerd. Jasper exhaled. He smiled. It wasn't the terrified smile of the crypt, or the polite smile of the library. It was a real one. You're welcome, Mason. So, V said, looking between us with narrowed eyes. She tapped her fingernails on the table. Are we going to talk about the fact that you two nearly died together in a tomb, held hands underwater, and are now exchanging sentimental literature? Or are we going to pretend this is just a book club meeting? Book club, I said instantly. Definitely book club, Jasper agreed. V rolled her eyes. Fine, you two are exhausting, but I'm buying the next round, and I'm picking the book. It's going to be something trashy with shirtless pirates. Actually, Jasper adjusted his glasses, a gleam in his eye. About pirates. Don't, I warned him. Do not lecture her on the socioeconomic realities of 18th century privateering. She will throw a beignet at you. I was just going to say, Jasper grinned, that Captain Rackham had excellent taste in rum, based on the manifest. I laughed. It felt strange in my chest, rusty, unused, but working. I looked out the window. The street was drying. The Spanish moss hung still in the live oaks, dripping the last of the storm water. The hum was gone. The silence in my head was beautiful. Uncle Rourke was safe. The town was safe. And for the first time in a long time, the dead were just dead. They weren't buzzing. They weren't judging. They were resting. Coffee, I said, raising my mug. To surviving. To history. Jasper tapped his mug against mine. To getting paid, V added. We drank. The coffee was bitter, scalding, and perfect. After breakfast, I drove back to the Boneyard. The police tape was still up, but the officer on duty waved me through. Official contractor? Pasco had called me. I walked to the sinking grounds. The water had receded, leaving a landscape of slick black mud. The Gills Mausoleum was a ruin, a pile of granite blocks half swallowed by the earth. It would need to be fully demolished. One more scar on the landscape. But the angel was still there, tilted, muddy, wing-chipped, but standing. Spade was there, scraping mud off the base with a trowel. He looked up as I approached. He didn't wave, he just pointed at a bucket of fresh mortar. Work. Yeah, I said, rolling up my sleeves. Work. I picked up a chisel. I walked to the angel. Reviewing the damage, I saw the fulcrum point, the scratch marks where Arthur had leveraged the stone. I saw the history of the murder etched in the rock. I mixed the mortar. Lime, sand, water. I began to fill the cracks. It wasn't magic. It wasn't detective work. It was just repair. Sealing the breaks. Making things whole again. The sun beat down on my neck. The cicadas started their buzz. A natural sound, not a supernatural one. I worked until my shoulders burned. I worked until the sun began to set, turning the swamp purple again. I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead. I looked toward the sawgrass, where I had seen the woman in black. There was nothing there, just receptors and shadows. Thank you, I whispered to the empty air. I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one. Just the wind, and the smell of drying mud, and the faint, lingering scent of hot peppers. I packed up my tools. I had a book to read, and tomorrow I had a library to fix. The Fallows was still sinking. The swamps were still full of secrets. But I had a map, a partner, and a plan. I could work with that.
Thank you for listening. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review.